present to you Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
The world of today is one fighting against systemic hatred and aggression. Society has grown tired of building walls to shut out the people that we disagree with. Soon, my generation will be given the exasperating responsibility of inheriting the problems that older generations have failed to solve. Racial inequality, gender discrimination, homophobia, climate change, and many more. The sheer horror of becoming an adult in the 21st century is overwhelming. This waking anxiety is encapsulated in The Last of Us Part 2, as it explores the destructive nature of division and the power of empathy in an apathetic world.
I don't think I can ever forgive you for that. But I would like to try.
I'd like that. In 2013, part 1 of this story was released. It was celebrated as amongst the best story-driven games on offer, and at the center of it all was Joel Miller. Through his story, players learned about the growth and the pain that comes with loving somebody else. This represented a turning point in modern gaming. As Joel learned to love Ellie, we learned to love Joel. He quickly became a PlayStation icon and a pop culture figurehead. And when the sequel was announced, titled The Last of Us Part 2, players were understandably excited to rediscover this character that they had grown to love. But in a single scene, Naughty Dog took a turn that nobody expected.
You stupid old man. You don't get to rush this.
The impact of Joel's death early in the game can be aptly defined with a term known as the other. In the late 18th century, George Hegel introduced this term, used to diminish and stigmatize people who we decide aren't like us. The process of othering occurs when we turn people into abstract entities that we justify treating as below human. Ultimately, this desire to antagonize people who are different leads to great suffering and other social illnesses. The climate surrounding Joel's death is a mild but remarkably notable example of the other. Abby, Joel's killer, is arguably one of the most divisive video game characters of all time, as many fans were upset with her inclusion in the game. The image of Abby beating Joel to death with a golf club has become synonymous with the hate that the game has received since its launch, and, with life imitating art, some of that venom has spilled over into real life. There has been months of abuse, vitriol, bigotry, and hatred aimed towards the game's creators, and just days after the game's release, actress Laura Bailey shared the death threats that she has received, a harrowing reminder of the hate still prevalent today. In a single scene, this world turned Abby and Naughty Dog into the other. But even if Naughty Dog didn't anticipate the volatility of the world's response to Abby, the alienation of the character was a calculated decision made by the game's writers. The death of Joel is designed to drive a deep wedge between the player and Abby, flooding the player with complex emotions such as grief, anger, and hatred. Crucially, these emotions are shared with one other character, Ellie. This breaks down a wall between the player and Ellie as they form a powerful connection in self-identity. Only video games, as a medium of interactive storytelling, can even attempt to involve its audience like this, because we, as players, naturally confide in the characters we control. Naughty Dog has not only set Ellie on a path to revenge, but also the player.
You really gonna go through with this?
gonna find. And I'm gonna kill. Every last one of them.
For the next 12 hours of the game, players control Ellie on a revenge mission to hunt down Abby. But as they progress, the player is forced to perform increasingly grotesque acts of violence. Killing enemies in the game is deliberately intended to be upsetting. There is no glamour or gratification associated with it, only a sick and twisted feeling of necessity. This is encapsulated in a scene where Ellie hunts down Laura, who's part of the group responsible for Joel's death. The intense red light and individual button presses are deeply uncomfortable for the player. This was carefully designed by the game to undermine the player's justification of their own beliefs. The philosopher Simone de Beauvoir wrote that otherness is a basic category of human thought, suggesting that people subconsciously use it to justify the morally ambiguous ways in which they treat those they disagree with. Ultimately, however, this leads to suffering for the demographics that have their humanity stripped away. This is what Naughty Dog is illustrating through the death of a person begging for her life. In this scene, they're forcing the player to reach an uncomfortable truth. By focusing on what makes our enemies different, we forget that they're human too.
You killed my friends. We let you both live. And you wasted it!
Halfway through the game, there is a point of view shift. The player ceases playing as Ellie. Instead, the clock winds back in time and the player wakes up controlling Abby, the killer that they had spent so long hunting. This is perhaps one of the most divisive twists in gaming history, because the player is now asked to walk a mile in the shoes of somebody that they had grown to resent. Despite engaging in the morally ambiguous actions of Ellie and killing dozens of people, this somehow feels far more uncomfortable than anything else the player has experienced up until that point. This is when the real story of The Last of Us Part 2 begins. The story that asks, what would happen if you became the other? This was a question first posed by the philosopher Emmanuel Levinas. He thought that we can only develop our sense of self due to our understanding of others. All of our beliefs, ideals, and principles form by acknowledging that we must positively engage with people who are different from us. In this regard, Levinas believed that otherness was not only productive, but essential, because rather than looking for similarities as the basis of our morality, we should recognize that another person is a universe of mystery, waiting to be understood. However, attempting to understand the other is difficult. When we wake up in the shoes of Abby, the entire mentality with which we've approached the game is challenged. No longer are we Joel's daughter, rather, we're now Joel's killer. This is Naughty Dog pushing the boundaries of what is possible in video games. They are asking us to reach inside ourselves and empathize with this character that we have come to resent. And perhaps along the journey, we would learn more about what makes us human. It's at this delicate point that the game reveals its second twist. Joel killed Abby's father.
Is he still in the fucking building?
Is that...
Abby.
No!
Abby, don't look.
Dad! Dad! No! No!
This is the revelation that when Abby lost her father, she was plunged into the exact same cycle of pain that we are in now. That is why Naughty Dog is forcing us to play the game from Abby's perspective, because now her story is about accepting that we are the same as our enemy. As players, this encourages us to redefine the way that we view our others. We had spent so long killing enemies in the first half of the game, and yet here they are. They're eating lunch in the cafeteria, playing fetch with their dogs, teaching young children in classrooms. We see the relationships they form, the hobbies they share. This is all deeply familiar, but at the same time, deeply uncomfortable. Why is this? Society has a long and dark history of discriminating those who we perceive as different. But if we are to succeed in life and in this game, we must learn to tear down those walls and show empathy. Doing so is difficult because of the pain that it brings. In the real world, that pain comes in the form of acknowledging the atrocities that we have committed.
We reflect in particular on the mistreatment of those who were stolen generations, this blemished chapter in our national history.
Naughty Dog illustrates this pain by exposing us to Abby's world. Each face we come across is one that we have killed while playing as Ellie. This is a reminder of the humanity that we ignore when we are fueled by hatred rather than compassion. But by acknowledging this, we can open up a space to create change and build a better future. The story leads us to Yara and Lev, the other of Abby's world. Despite belonging to an enemy faction, they are rescued by Abby and nursed back to life. What ensues is a confrontation between the cause that Abby roots herself in and her desire to move past that and engage with her other.
Come on, those were your fucking people. You're my people.
Abby's story is an important example of what happens when we overcome our differences. She chooses to stop the cycle of violence by looking after her enemy. This is a decision to pursue empathy despite the difficulties it may bring initially. There are important connotations between Abby and us. Her journey isn't easy, but neither is ours. In a world beset by discrimination, segregation, and hostility, we need to remind ourselves of the humanity behind the noise. The 21st century can be one of change, but only if we are willing to acknowledge our suffering and commit to a kinder tomorrow. Doing so certainly won't be easy for us, just as it wasn't easy for Abby. But if we can achieve this, we will learn to love each other and show empathy in an apathetic world.
No. I'm not gonna fight you. Yes, you will.
The Last of Us Part 2 culminates in a showdown between Ellie and Abby.
He's not a part of this. You made him a part of this.
This is a sequence of events that is incredibly jarring for us.
Okay.
As players, we have no idea who to root for. The delineation between friend and enemy no longer exists, causing a complete loss of subjective self-identity. The sight is not glamorous or gratifying. It's just one lost soul senselessly beating another. This is the game at its most naked. It's the price of hostility, the inevitable pain and suffering that arrives when we build walls rather than tear them down. But then Ellie lets Abby go because she realizes the lesson that Naughty Dog has been teaching us all along. The lesson that we have it within us to understand the person drowning in the water. This is a mentality that finds itself in the roots of empathy. If we as humans accept this ending, then we're accepting that our others are worth saving. This is the lesson that Naughty Dog is trying to teach. How can we act with empathy to create a better tomorrow? It's difficult to acknowledge the real and often overwhelming differences between us, but that's okay, because we have something to learn from every individual we come across, no matter how much or how little of ourselves we see in them. In this regard, The Last of Us Part 2 pushes the boundaries of what's possible in video games. Developer Naughty Dog has weaved powerful themes of grief, trauma, and love into a story that's equally complex and beautiful. It's a story of multiple characters, each with their own demons, motivations, and failings. Amongst those characters, however, is ourselves. By extending an arm to us, the players, Naughty Dog has created a story that is, above all else, an exploration in division and empathy.